Pivot Bio. That's a company we've been working with now for about, going into our 6th year with NextGen. And I think there's a lot of people out there that really don't know the whole story behind Pivot Bio. So I wanted to have you on, Tom, to kind of tell that story. So if you want to just start from the very beginning, who is Pivot Bio and how'd they start?
That was the fun part for me. I just happened to be researching online competitor microbial companies, and I saw Pivot Bio and went, wait a minute, is this for real? And basically 2 PhDs, they were in their post-grad together doing a lot of research, and at the end of that, they're asking themselves, what kind of scientific breakthroughs could we do to improve the planet? And, questions like, hey, can corn fertilize itself? Can we wake up the microbes in the soil such that, we can increase nitrogen output? That's vintage scientists asking questions, these big ones, what if? And so I started to follow them there. And when I looked at all the science behind, I think it was 11 years before they actually cracked the code to get naturally occurring microbes which were made to produce nitrogen in the soils, but not in the presence of synthetic fertilizer. That was the breakthrough. And once Karsten and Alvin figured out the gene edit sequence such that they could put these microbes into this environment surrounded by synthetic, and they still produce nitrogen. That's a big feat in science. And that was the breakthrough for Pivot Bio to say, hey, we've got microbes that will work in the presence of synthetic to supply a daily dose of nitrogen. Microbes wouldn't do that naturally. They're more like today's teenagers. If they don't have to go to work, they won't. And they figured out a way to get them to work. And here's Pivot Bio.
Yeah, and it was really just a couple college kids, playing in a lab and figured out how they can actually change the actual DNA of the microbes to get this to produce nitrogen. And man, it's kind of crazy to think that a couple 20-something-year-old kids were able to figure this out. I think a lot of times in ag, it's experience always trumps everything, and that's why I know just growing up on my farm, it was if your dad said something, he always knew best because he'd been at it longer.
Right. Well, and you're talking about these guys being kids. For me, they're definitely kids. This is back in the early 2000s. They started this venture.
That's right. Yeah, they're still older than me. I can't really call them kids, but yeah.
Yeah, I just looked at the science and thought, wow, taking a leap like that and cracking the code and pulling it off. You're talking about, working with the DNA. I think it's important to understand that it's not a GMO. It's not taking a gene out or adding a foreign gene in. It's just simply taking what the microbe naturally has in its genome and saying, oh, here's how we can get you to not understand that you're surrounded by synthetic, and they still believe, I've got to go to work and do my job, which is produce nitrogen. But what's really cool, too, is that they're fixing the nitrogen from the atmosphere and producing the ammonium, which is a source most sought after by plant uptake for nitrogen. So it was a perfect combination for those guys to pull that off.
Yeah, I'm very excited to dive in, deep to the science and what actually makes their microbes work and how they function with that partnership with the plant too. What made Pivot Bio really stick out to you?
So my background coming from academia, being a high school science teacher for 23 years, teaching primarily chemistry, but some biology as well. When I left, I went to a biotech company, and we were working with microbes primarily for silage fermentation bunkers. Can we improve the starch release? Can we improve the nutritional quality of a feed bunker? Also, toxicity, a healthy feed bunker. And that was really fun. Brand new, got to learn silage. But while I was doing that, there's a lot of competitors, just like seed brands. You got different, we've got this, and 4 or 5 major silage inoculant companies. So I was always fascinated on what microbes do they have? Is there a trade secret? Is there something we're missing here in our combinations? And so while doing that, I typed in some microbial questions and up came Pivot Bio. And I went, oh no, here we go. Here's another one. And as I read through it, I was intrigued right at hello, but when you say skepticism, that's also vintage scientist. It's like, wait a minute, repeatability. We need to see some things. So when I saw Pivot, I thought, all right, it's too good to be true. That was my initial reaction. No way. And so what was interesting is I started to visit growers that were using some of our seed and some of our inoculum. I showed up and sure enough, there it was in the shop. They're getting ready to plant. And I'm like, you're using Pivot Bio? Yeah, we're going to give it a go. And it was 2 years back to back. It went from one farmer to four, and all four said, yeah, we were able to replace synthetic nitrogen, some of it, with these microbes, and it did exactly what they said. And it was immediate. I'm like, I need to call these guys. This is the train to be on in my mind. Like, wow, because where else do you have this? So seeing it for 2 years, I called, reached out, just wanted to talk a little more about it. And they were looking for somebody who could manage the distribution for Colorado. And that just happened to be where I lived. And I jumped on it as soon as I could. And gee, Paul, we're about 2 months away from just shy of 3 years of being with Pivot.
Farmers know that nitrogen can be fickle. Studies and field trials highlight Pivot Bio's strong performance in areas with difficult spring weather. In these areas with excessive rain and saturated soils, Pivot Bio's gene-edited microbes continue to supply nitrogen in the root zone when and where crops need it most. The result? Less stress on your crops, higher yield potential, and happier harvests. So bring it on, Mother Nature.
NextGen also had a similar, beginnings with a lot of skepticism around Pivot Bio. And in that first year, we did over 20 field trials just in Northeast Colorado, had a couple in Nebraska, a couple in the Panhandle of Oklahoma as well. And it was, I think it was 2020, and nitrogen was super high. So we had a few customers that were, willing to give it a shot. So after evaluating all those trials and doing all the work to put those in, really what we saw was, hey, there is something with this product that, it's obviously supplying nitrogen. And at that time, it was just the proven product. So it was really
Right.
25 pounds, just one strand of bacteria in it. And when we started doing trials with their proven 40, I think year 3 we were with Pivot Bio. That's when we really could tell the difference of, we're able to cut a fair amount of synthetic nitrogen out of that grower standard program and not lose yield, and sometimes even gain a little bit of yield, especially in Northeast Colorado. We have a lot of low C soils, very low organic matter, and it was really a good fit for Pivot Bio. And one of the things I'll never forget, one of the first trials we walked out to was about V6, V8 corn. And that grower normally side dresses his corn right there. He cultivates, and then he puts on about 40 to 50 units of nitrogen. And he cut it completely out on the Pivot Bio strip, and also an adjacent pass that did not have the Pivot Bio microbes. And where Pivot Bio was in that field, even though he reduced the nitrogen, was the best looking strip in the whole field. And you could tell where he cut out that nitrogen and did not have Pivot Bio. It was severe nitrogen deficiency, even early on in the year, early to mid vegetative stages of corn. So that really is what made me a believer. And then year 2, it was very much of, okay, how can we make this a part of our nitrogen program, especially where we battle all these, nitrogen inefficiencies with synthetic fertilizer, in low CEC soils. We really battle with leaching and in some of our heavier soils, higher magnesium, we really struggle with denitrification if we get some rains, or if we're running that pivot around too much in our areas. So there's a lot of battles with synthetic nitrogen efficiency, and I felt like Pivot Bio was something, not a silver bullet by any means, but once you learn to make it a part of your nitrogen program, it really is a good fit, and it's 40 pounds that you can count on. So Pivot Bio is a company, I think, when they first started, there was a lot of a lot of excitement around it in the investor world, and so they got in. Really, went from 0 to 100 very fast, I felt like. And I know I've talked to a couple farmers, that sees a lot of the Pivot Bio marketing. And I think there's some confusion there too. Is like, okay, well, what's this company all about? How did it start? Is it all, is just these big investor dollars and venture capitalists, looking to get rich? And I think it's cool just to go back to the fact, like you said, it really did start out as, two kids in a lab, with some very breakthrough technology to change out agriculture, and just the questions they were asking themselves, can we ever get to a point where the plant itself can provide its own nitrogen in a world that, for 70 years has only known one nitrogen, and yet every area of agriculture has improved other than fertilizer for, multiple decades now. New planter equipment, new harvesting equipment, new technologies as far as data management and crop monitoring with cameras and sensors, and then there's so many farmers out there still applying, anhydrous or urea that's been around for decades. So it really was, coming to the agriculture world at the beginning of, I wouldn't say the beginning of the biological revolution, so to speak, but definitely as far as a significant amount of nitrogen that can be replaced.
Capturing a couple of things that you said, again, one of the statements that I saw early on in the research was, can we eventually eliminate synthetic fertilizer? And I'm like, whoa, that is ambitious. I mean, what if? I mean, you already are on this track where you can produce nitrogen biologically, right? And they also saw, looking into Pivot Bio, look at the investment folks right on that, okay, that's awesome. But I was more excited about the science. I mean, when I looked at the list of universities, MIT, and I was like, they wouldn't be there if this wasn't something real. And okay, if they've got all these dollars up front and it's not real, it's not going to last very long. However, your year 3 was my year 1. And so coming into it, I understand the science. I mean, these guys are brilliant, but I understand what we've got going here. But again, before I got in the field, it was paperwork that I could read. Okay, I understand the story, but your year 3, my year 1 is when I actually got to go in the field and do testing. In fact, we did some together. That's when it just got even better, got more exciting. I remember my first trial, and we had the chlorophyll test and the biomass test. And I remember going to the first grower who had 3 different replacement levels. And once we pulled them out, we laid the test plot right there on the ground in front of the grower. The first thing the grower said was, wow, I over-fertilize. We didn't have to say a thing. And this is the first field I've done a check on and going, it was that obvious to me, but then things just continued to get better. I couldn't wait to test more fields, and being a scientist, it's like, man, it's starting to repeat itself. I'm in the right place. But also, you have to understand, you were a big part of me really getting excited about Pivot Bio. Just what you said, the number of trials that you did with NextGen. I didn't really understand that until your first grower meeting. And I went to that. And I went, whoa, this guy's not just a rep of Pivot Bio. He's got his own fertilizer business, But Pivot Bio, I think it was the perfect combo because yes, you sell synthetic, you sell some other things, but in that first grower meeting, you proved to me even more that the results that I was pulling out of the field, now you've got those times 10. And then just the way you collect data, Paul, I was like, well, I remember coming back out here a week later going, Paul, there's a lot going on here. And in what you're doing to do test plots and the different replacement levels, I just said, man, I am so glad that I'm a part of this. But that was my first year, and it's just gotten better since.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And I do remember that, that week after that first trial meeting of mine that you attended, and it was much appreciated. I guess all your compliments around it, because trialing is not a fun job by any means. It's kind of tedious, and then a lot of times, you got to sort through the good data versus the bad data, and that's what makes nitrogen testing so hard. Is that there's so many variables that impact it. We talked about soil type a little bit, and then there's weather as well. And then there's, is the grower over applying nitrogen in the first place? And you kind of hinted at that earlier. A lot of times I've seen, some of these biological companies, which, there's over 1,000 of them right now just in the United States. And I think a lot of them kind of prey on that. This person's probably over applying nitrogen, and we can cut back, 10 to 20 pounds, and we're not going to see a yield drag. And maybe our product can produce it, and maybe our product can't. But regardless, we're going to look okay in this trial because the grower's over applying synthetic nitrogen. So really getting it out in the field and understanding how the product works is the only way to go in my mind when testing nitrogen reduction products.
100%. I think the word skepticism is really important because I was, and I don't have, my lifeline of farming on the line, but I also, as a scientist, am skeptic because, you're actually having a conversation telling somebody that, what I see is true. And I still see a lot of skepticism. And I think to overcome that is take a piece that fits you in your operation. Just take a piece of it. You have to see it yourself, period. Some of the testing that we did, well, the best, the funnest, I'll put it this way, I think the most fruitful and fun field testing we did is when the grower was right there with us. Because here's what I hear all the time. Well, I can't really see it. Well, you really don't when you're driving by a cornfield. Now, if you follow it through the growth stages, and you maybe, we actually got so excited, you used some drone footage because it was absolutely black and white. But if the grower's not there, then they're, what are you telling me? I was at a conference a couple weeks ago, and there's a new phrase out there. They're called morons.
It's not new.
Even though the soil test says this, we got to put more on and more on. And I think that's probably been pretty standard for quite a while, is more is better. But I will tell you, having seen the repeatability, that's the only way you're going to catch my attention, is when it repeats and repeats. And for you now, 6 years, for me, 3, get the grower to the field when it's time to show some differences. And let's be fair. There were some where we didn't have what we expected to go see when we tested. In fact, we had some failures. And the beauty there is we're not over yet. Let's figure this thing out. What happened? And when you go back and you look at, sit with the grower and talk about the entire process, we can usually find a spot and go, yep, that was an area we probably shouldn't have done what we did. So that's where now, after 3 years looking at best management practices and how we found consistency in where and when, and really taking that risk profile out for the farmer, each year I just think we get better and better and better.
We feel like Pivot Bio has just really helped us to be more efficient than we were before. I think a lot of times people can look at farming and think it can be about the money, and at the end of the day, being able to work with our family day in and day out and have those relationships is pretty exciting. Being able to pass this on to my kids is really special.
One of the things that I also, tip my hat on to Pivot Bio is the fact that they, even from the very beginning, were very clear on how to apply the product to get the microbes, to thrive in that situation in the field, once they're applied. And I think before that, there were a lot of companies. I mean, it hurts to say it, especially, in my position as a retailer. And I sure hope I never sold dead microbes to a farmer. But if we're being honest with ourselves, there's a lot of dead microbes that have been sold to a farmer, or live microbes being sold to the farmer. And then once they're applied, maybe they're mixed with something that's not compatible, and they end up applying dead microbes at the time of application. And then there's that third period where, okay, we put them in the ground, they're alive. Are they in a environment to colonize on that root? And I think those are really three areas, and Pivot Bio just calls it their stewardship.
Yeah,
it's handling the product correctly, making sure that microbes are alive when it's applied, and then applying it in a fashion where the product performs the best and can colonize on those roots.
Think about the difficulty. You coined it is, first of all, these are live microbes, and they're sensitive to a lot of things. I mean, ultraviolet light, heat, having to go in the field with other components, other minerals that are added, and there's some that are devastating to the microbes. So imagine this: you start out as Pivot Bio. I can't remember how many acres in their first year, but now we're closing in on 4 million acres. Think of the different soil types. Think about the different number of growers or maybe farm managers or laborers that handle the product. And think about the difficulty of quality control to make sure that, okay, we've seen some mistakes that were not necessarily on the microbe standpoint, but where was it put? When we had a Pivot Bio put in tank with liquid and furrow, okay, we learned. There were some cases, a new liquid application that we didn't understand, or the grower didn't understand, that some of the percentages of the components in there were, our microbes are not going to survive that. So Pivot Bio looked at every angle, putting a dosatron on the planter so that you can put in maybe something we're not compatible with ahead, but once we hit the soil, everybody's buffered, we're good. Then from there, how can we get better on that? How do we decrease the risk profile on just the methodology of putting it in? Hey, let's go to a seed treatment. Now you can put it on seed. That was, to me, that was incredible, that you can put it on seed and have 60 days. So, grower can get their ProBox treated, and we're not just talking corn here. We're talking about a variety of crops. So we're here in Colorado, right? I think Colorado can adopt or place every SKU that Pivot Bio has. So, millets, sorghums, wheat. It's pretty incredible.
There's a lot more diversity out here as you move to the west. It's not we're not just like the I-states where it's corn or beans.
Who wants to farm in Colorado, really? And you look at some areas in Colorado and you say, wow, it's hostile. And like you said, our CECs, but look at our organic matters, look at the sand versus, we don't have a leg up compared to those states that, their soil does a lot of work for them. We need things that do a lot of work for our soils. And this is, we see it here in Colorado. It's exciting to be in Colorado. This product shines out here.
Yeah, it does. And I think another thing worth touching on here as we just get to know Pivot Bio and learn a little bit about their product is that application and why their microbes have to be applied the way they are. Starting off, at first they just had a liquid in furrow product. It was produced 25 pounds of nitrogen, pulled in that nitrogen from the air, from the atmosphere, and converted it to ammonium, put it into the plant root. Okay, that makes sense. Once the microbes are alive in there, but how do we get them alive, and how do we get them to colonize on that corn root? And it really was the understanding of their product that I think helped them bring more value in the biological world, because I know there's a lot of good products out there that just don't have the timing figured out or the application figured out, and so they end up seeing subpar results. And that's one thing, again, just on the research side and understanding, these fragile microbes, which they're fragile to begin with, and then changing them to make them produce more nitrogen really makes them a little bit more volatile to the surroundings. So making sure we're placing, that in-furrow product with, right there in the seed trench so it can attach to that corn root as soon as it germinates, and making sure we're not putting it with a lot of high salt fertilizers like 1034 and in furrow.
1034 is just a bad one anyway.
Yeah. We'll get to Pivot Bio Plus.
Talking about that, Paul, we talk about Pivot Bio, the microbes living on the root. I mean, just stop and think about that for a second. Ask a grower, okay, you're going to put your nitrogen out there. Where do you want your nitrogen? Well, I want it as close to the seed as I can possibly get it. If it's on the root, the moment that seed germinates, I don't know how you can get any closer. And what's fun is later on, as we start to talk about other things we've tested, when we get to a later episode about silage, things like that, it's really evident that what does nitrogen at the root really look like? What are the other benefits that we see? And that's what I think has made these last 3 years so much fun, is to go, wow, there's some other repeatabilities we don't talk about with some incredible ROIs. Stay tuned.
Absolutely. Well, I'm excited to dig a little bit deeper into the science and also the trialing side. What do those trials actually look like? How do we place them in a field to get a good comparison? And a lot of good more information to come about Pivot Bio and turning to a better nitrogen. So,
awesome. Thank you, Paul. It's fun to be here.
Thanks, Tom.